like a little movie, like a little idiot. Freaking FedEx guy. Take 2, because the FedEx guy left. Freaking FedEx guy. It is a perfect, my favorite. This is a Johnny episode. The whole Johnny Crash journey is on my channel. Alright guys, it is time for some post-road trip love for the old Dyna. This thing has gotten filthy the last couple times I've taken it on the road because I've gotten caught in the rain a couple times and it has a couple little oil leaks, and there's also a lot of bugs down in the kootenays. So old Johnny is a pretty dirty old bike. It is a perfectly beautiful day for a bike washing day. Not too hot, just a little cloudy and just enough sun to keep me warm. So I'm actually really excited to start doing this because I've been editing for days and being in front of the computer is not my most favoritist thing. So I'm pretty excited to be outside washing my bike. And then when we're done that, I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a walk around tour of old Johnny Crash. I'm gonna tell you guys a little bit of the story behind old Johnny because not all of you have been here from the beginning of my channel, so some of you just don't know. And I'll tell you why his name is Johnny Crash, tell you where I got him from, tell you what my dad and I did to get him on the road and set up for me, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So first, let's have a little before looky at this dirty old Dyna so you guys can see just how dirty it is. So I've been caught in the rain a couple times on him, and you don't need much rain to make your bike filthy, as a lot of you may know. And the only parts of him that are clean are the parts where my legs rub, because my legs are still pretty short, so yeah, they touch a couple spots. He's definitely a dirty bike and he needs a washing. And of course, before we can get started, we do have to have a Timmy's brake, even though, is it technically a brake if you haven't even started working yet? Anyways, definitely need the Timmy's tea steeped and chocolate glazed donut. 2 honey, 2 cream in the tea, and chocolate glazed donut. And we're doing this bike wash like a true Canadian would, minus the now legal substances that I will not be consuming. It was a little chillier when I decided to go get tea. It's pretty warm out now, so probably could have gone with an iced coffee, but the tea will do. Let's get going. One important thing when you're washing a dirty old Harley is to make sure you have enough soap in the water. I found that when I was working at Harley, a lot of people who washed bikes there didn't put enough soap in. And that just ended up leading to the bike still looking dirty by the time they were done washing it. And you know, once the bike is wet, it's like hard to see where all the dirt is. So you really got to make a conscious effort of wiping every single part of the bike if you want your bike to actually look clean. If you don't care, then well, maybe don't wash it. And I always put a bag on the air cleaner, unless your air cleaner is actually sealed, like some of them are more sealed for water. And before you put the bag on the air cleaner, you always want to wipe it off. I always wipe it off because you don't want to scratch stuff up. Make sure it's good and tucked in. I'm going to go around the carburetor and over, under, all around. Okay, no water in the air cleaner. Good, now we're ready. Sometimes I'll cover up the seat with garbage bag, but I'm just going to be careful-ish today, so I'm not going to worry about the seat. Also, using like hot water really helps too. Depending on how nice your bike is, you're gonna wanna do this a little differently than I do. I'm not super duper picky about my Johnny Crash, but I always will rinse a bit of the dirt off before I start wiping because that'll just help to avoid get scratches. And this dirt is all so caked on that it's not really helping to spray it off. And no matter what, I'm always a little sad when I'm getting my bikes wet. It's not the wettest he's ever been. All right, time to wash. A lot of you don't know where I got my old Dyna from. And I call my Dyna Johnny Crash because he was actually an insurance write-off. I actually went and bought him sight unseen. the deal was that it was an ICBC write-off, right? When I got the Dyna, it only had 6,400 kilometers on it. And for a 1994 Evo, that's like super low kilometers. It's like a brand new motor pretty much. And it was only $4,500. And the reason how come the kilometers on it was so low is because before this lady owned it, it had been owned by an old man who lived somewhere on Vancouver Island here, and I guess they had like all these noise bylaws there, so he didn't really ride it much because of that. And this lady got the bike and she didn't really ride it much. She ended up selling to a friend of hers who didn't own it for very long before he had some kind of a thing going on with an ex, and his ex-girlfriend, according to the story that the lady who sold me the bike told, ran the bike over in a parking lot. So she knocked it over intentionally with her car, and all the damage that was on the bike was because of that. So the bodywork was all dented up and stuff. We replaced the front fender, we got a big dent out of the tank, and you know, there's some broken parts that had to be replaced and things like that. And I was a little suspicious to, you know, just at the fact that it was a write-off, just thinking like, it didn't really seem like the damage that I was looking at was worth writing off the bike. And anyways, when I went to go look at it, like I said, it was sight unseen. We drove there. It was like a 6-hour drive to get there. We didn't have time to actually stay and look at the bike. The lady told me that she was taking it out for regular rides, keeping it running and all this stuff, and that the bike was just being kind of like taken care of, but it needed work done to it to be able to get it insured and blah, blah, blah. When I went there to look at the bike, I didn't have a battery in it. There was no gas in the tank. So those things were kind of like my first hint that this lady was just kind of full of it, and that she hadn't been riding it because it didn't have a battery. It didn't have gas in the tank. It was obviously not being ridden. And as soon as I went to grab the bike and load it up into the truck, I grabbed the bars and they were so loose. I was like, this bike's obviously not being ridden by anybody. No one's riding a bike with bars this loose. So anyways, I didn't complain about it. I paid her money and I just prayed to God that I wasn't getting ripped off. So we took it home, and when I got home with it, I immediately I drained the oil, whatever, checked the carburetor out, things like that. And I drained the oil. It was full of gasoline. Yeah, I was glad that I didn't try to start it because the oil was full of gasoline. So kind of had me even more suspicious, and by that point I was panicking, wondering if I got a lemon, and I will link my first start video up here on the screen for you guys. Rinse this soap off before it dries. After I discovered all the gas in the oil, I was having a full-on panic attack. Just feeling like, maybe I got a lemon and maybe the bike didn't even run, and I just spent all my savings on a bike that was basically garbage. So I changed my plans from just tearing right into the bike and starting working on it to okay, now I just need to see if it runs. So I took the carburetor apart right away, cleaned it up, rebuilt it, and did whatever I had to do to get the bike running, put some clean oil in it, and I immediately did a compression test. I was so relieved when I did that compression test because I had stock compression in both cylinders. Obviously that just changed everything, and I was just so happy and excited, but there was still a whole lot of work to be done to the old Dyna. Now that I knew I had a good running bike, it was just time to do whatever else it needed to get it all fixed up and ready for the road. So there's a few things my dad and I did, which I'll show you guys as soon as I'm done washing the bike. And the one surprise find that we had while working on it, actually more than a year after purchasing the bike, took us that long to notice. And that was because that was the first time I ever had it on a lift. So I'm just gonna finish washing the bike and then I'll continue on with my story. The difference a good wash will make on a dirty motorcycle. Looks pretty good, if I have to say so myself. So normally after I wash my bikes, I'll go for a ride to help them dry off, but my bike won't start. So it's got a dead battery and I'm a little bit puzzled as to why, because it's only been like a week since I started it last, which is not very long. So I've got something to investigate, but I'm not going to be doing that in this video. We're going to do a little walk around of the bike and I'm just going to tell you guys the story of, well, the rest of the story of what my dad and I did to it to make it work for me and to get it back on the road. There are a few little things that we changed about this bike to get it fit for me, but also just to get it good for the road. We wanted to do as little as possible to it as we could, just to save my budget and just to save time and whatnot, even though it did take a lot longer than we thought it would, because it was like every little job we did ended up being a big job, which is kind of typical for a bike that you are basically restoring. We didn't change a whole lot for the bodywork. We kept the tank, I kept the rear fender. We did have to straighten out the rear fender a little bit. The tank had a big dent in it that we pulled out, and there's still a couple little dents in it, which I'm gonna keep because I don't mind. I don't need this bike to be super fancy. I've got my fancy bike. We got shorter fork tubes for the front end because I'm short and I couldn't really reach the ground with the bike the way that it was. We also got shorter shocks for the back, so the bike sits about 3 inches lower than where it was. I got a different fender, which I ordered from Fort 9, so my fender is new. I put the 21-inch wheel on it because it had a 16-inch front wheel on it. Kept the controls all the same. I've got a lot of people ask me about the hydraulic clutch, and the hydraulic clutch was on there when I got the bike. I think that the old man who owned the bike to begin with is the one who put it on there. We did actually raise the bars up too a little bit, so we made like our own little risers. I think we used aluminum plate because aluminum plate is like already pretty perfect, and we cut them out with hole saws, cleaned it up, and then we drilled out the centers. So we made like our own little risers for the bars. And I have a lot of people ask me what the bars are, and these are like called burley bars or something like that. The pipes are, well, the mufflers were no longer stock, so it did have Screaming Eagle mufflers on there, and I took those off. I didn't like how big and chunky they were, so these are actually just a couple of bends that we got done in regular old exhaust pipe at an exhaust shop here, and I kind of like that straight pipe look, even though these do have baffles in them, homemade baffles in them. We just got them bent and then we slash cut them ourselves, so these are not mandrel bends or anything fancy like that, because we wanted to make this like super quick. We didn't do a whole lot of custom stuff on it, but there was a few custom things we did. The most involved thing actually that we did for custom was the floorboard mounts. So this had forward pegs on it before, and I'm way too short for forward controls on a bike like this, and I didn't want to take the time to look for the whole inner primary setup and everything else I needed for the mid controls. So we did make floorboard mounts for it, and we put these newer floorboards off of a newer decker on it. So that also required us to make our own like linkage, which we had to shorten the linkage for the shifter quite a bit. And we also made the mount for the shifter, which we had to move back quite a ways too. We obviously had to change the brake pedal too, because the brake had to get moved back. So we made our own little custom brake pedal there. I still have my CV carb on here, but as you guys can see, I've got a Super E air cleaner on here. So we did make an adapter plate to go from the CV carburetor to a Super E backing plate, and I actually like the way the teardrop looks on this Dyna. Like, I think it really suits it. I've never been a fan of the teardrops personally, but I really think it suits the Dyna and just like the whole chunkiness of the wide glides. I've never been like a big wide glide fan just because they are kind of chunky looking to me, but I get a lot of compliments on this bike, and I personally, I'm not super picky about how the Dyna looks. I think it looks good for what it is, and there's a lot of people who really like it. So I'm happy with how it looks, and for me, it's just as long as it gets me from A to B. That's really what matters to me. Another more involved thing that we did is we actually fit a mag wheel on the back. So we actually had like this AMF mag wheel sitting around. So my dad and I made the mag wheel fit on here, 1970s AMF mag wheel on a 94 Dyna, and I have a video for that. I will link in one of these corners here. You guys can go check that out if you want. It actually looks pretty good on here. So I had like really long cables on the bike, so the cables were like way too long, and I am a broke biker and I didn't want to go and buy new cables, and I also didn't want to wait for them to come in. I think at the time it was like a super long wait. It was still during COVID, so everything was just taking forever to show up, and I just didn't want to wait for them. So we actually made, like, we call them cable restraints, and they're actually just a couple little aluminum blocks that are just holding my Speedo cable to my brake line and just keeping my Speedo cable from flopping all over the place and getting in the way. I think that's pretty much it for custom stuff, guys. So I did say that there was one surprise thing that we ended up coming across after like a year of having the bike around. But while we were doing the floorboards, we finally had the bike up on a lift for the first time, and my dad was on this side of the bike, the primary side, fitting the floorboards on and noticing that there was like no room between the frame and the primary. Like the frame was touching the inner primary, and that was when we realized that the frame on the bike was actually bent. Thank God, the way that it was bent, it was just kind of bowed up so that it was touching the primary, but it wasn't bent in such a way that it had distorted the straightness of the frame in any ways. When we realized that, then that kind of made everything kind of make sense and click, with the lady telling me that it was a write-off, because with the damage that was on the bodywork, I don't think that it was enough damage to actually be a write-off to the bike, because the front end wasn't bent. The front end was straight. There was nothing broken about the front end. It was just like dents and stuff on the tin. And yeah, there wasn't really anything super major that could have made it be an insurance write-off. But when we found that bent frame, then that just made everything make sense. And it was like, hey, well, that is why they would have written it off. So I have another video too of that, of my dad and I actually straightening the frame. If you guys want to see how we did that without taking the engine out of the bike, then you guys can check that video out. I'll link it somewhere around here. But you know what? It all worked out in my favor, because I got a really low mileage motorcycle for a super cheap price, and sure, it might be rebuild status, which would affect the resale value if I ever want to sell the bike, but I don't plan on selling the bike. So I basically have a brand new Evo to ride around wherever I want to. I got it with about 6,400 kilometers on it, and I've got just over 11,000 kilometers on it now. So I've done a few good trips on it, and I actually really like the bike. The more that I ride it, the more I enjoy it, and this bike's actually really growing on me. And anyone who's been in my channel from the start will remember the little bit of bitterness that I held towards Johnny Crash at the beginning there, just because he was such a chore to get on the road. But guys, that is the story behind the old Johnny Crash. And no, I am not superstitious, so I don't have a problem calling him Johnny Crash. I don't think that that name is going to cause me to get into an accident. I think my neglect as a rider, or driver's neglect on the road, will cause me to get into an accident. But anyway, I'm not superstitious, so his name is Johnny Crash, and I think it suits him very well. So guys, that's the story behind the Dyna. I know that a lot of you guys really like this bike, and I've never really told his story before, and I hope that you guys like this video. And if you guys want to know more of the story, or kind of like just see more of the Johnny Crash story in action, there's actually a full playlist on my channel, which I'll link at the end of this video, that you can watch all of my Johnny videos, all from the day that I went to pick him up all the way up to the day that he was actually done and going for his first ride. And yeah, it's actually pretty fun, guys. It's actually probably the bike that helped kick off my YouTube channel, because it just gave me like a whole series of videos to actually work on. But I'm glad that you guys stuck around for this video if you're still here right now, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it. And like always guys, if you like what you see, or if you just like me, or even if you don't like me but you like my bike, then like, comment, subscribe, to all those things you guys do. And like always, my lovely YouTube people, I'll catch y'all on the flip side. Peace. I always say my inner self is a 300-pound lady. One more little snacky snack before I get started. Hoi, yeah. Oh shoot, tripod's broken. Freaking wasp, stay away from my donut. Where's that the Super Bee cover? I find that I don't even know if you can see me, which is annoying. And it is so shadowy here. What? Stereotype? No, that's not it. I don't know what it is. Yes, sir, Bob. Who is Bob, anyways? And before I put the, oh my gosh, what the heck, man? You can't be doing that. Shake that off.